Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you in part by Coca-Cola.
By the generous support of the Alaska Native Health Board.
And by Chugachmute.
Welcome to Heartbeat Alaska. I'm Jeannie Greene, bringing you Native news across the North and the lower 48. Today we travel to Aniak, Alaska. That's in the southwestern section of Alaska for an elders conference. And then all the way up to the Arctic to Point Hope, where we visit a reburial of 900-year-old human remains. Also yesterday here in Anchorage, we attended a powwow. The Lakota singers were brought up from outside just for that event. Gary Fife is with us again, this time with a special perspective, his as a journalist and a viewer, on the presidential activities which he attended for National Native News and photographed for Heartbeat Alaska. All that and much, much more. But first, here's Gary Fife with National Native News.
This is National Native News. I'm Gary Fife. President Clinton is sending up his first budget for congressional review, and the first figures for Native American programs are trickling out of the nation's capital. For the Bureau of Indian Affairs, $2.4 billion has been requested. That's up $261 million from last year. The Indian Health Service budget request is $2 billion, up $22 million from their previous request. That number breaks down to provide $1.7 billion for health services, $285 million for new facilities, $45 million to meet the backlog of water and sewer connections for existing tribal homes, and $40 million for those services to newly constructed tribal housing. IHS officials predict they can collect $138 million from federal and insurance agencies to cover some costs of Native health care. Though overall funding for the U.S. Department of Education is holding steady in the Clinton budget request, the administration is proposing an increase for the Office of Indian Education. Administration officials are asking for $84 million to fund Office of Indian Education programs, which include grants to local schools, technical assistance, and adult education. That's about $3 million more than last year's budget. A draft management plan to restrict visitors to the Medicine Wheel National Historic Landmark in Wyoming has the U.S. Forest Service concerned. They and some local residents are unhappy about draft requirements of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to close the site periodically. The plan would bar vehicle traffic on the road leading to the site considered sacred by the tribes of the Northern Plains. Natives would get exclusive religious use of the wagon wheel-shaped site for 12 days each year, and the Forest Service would have to consider other Native requests for ceremonial use and closure. The area would also be closed if interested parties believe non-closure has damaged, quote, spiritual values or physical integrity, end quote. Local County Commissioner Ray Peterson says because the landmark is on public land, access to it should not be restricted for some. A German researcher in Berlin has confirmed that brain damage from fetal alcohol syndrome is permanent even if physical problems disappear. That's bad news for Native Americans who have a rate 2 to 3 times higher than the national average. The researcher says emotional and intellectual damages remain throughout the child's lifetime. The damage can easily be prevented. Pregnant women should drink no alcohol. The U.S. Supreme Court has denied an appeal to the first Native American U.S. Marine court-martialed for espionage. The High Court said it would not hear the appeal from Sergeant Clayton Lonetree, who was convicted in 1987 of passing secrets to the old Soviet Union's KGB while serving as a U.S. embassy guard in Moscow. Lonetree had argued that his confessions to an intelligence officer were under a promise of confidentiality and should not have been used by the prosecution during the trial. Lonetree is being held in the U.S. Federal Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. The leaders of the Taos Pueblo in northern New Mexico say Native American sovereignty over airspace should be formally recognized by the federal government under their treaty rights. The Pueblo is trying to bring action to reroute military training flights that fly over and disturb their community's religious ceremonies and their privacy. They also want to halt the expansion of the local airport, saying more tourism brings more intrusion. City officials from Taos say the town needs a larger airport and the added tourist revenues. And finally, the public television program Surviving Columbus has won the prestigious Peabody Award, one of the highest honors in journalism. The eight-part, 2-hour documentary produced by the Institute for American Indian and Alaska Native Arts and the public television KNME examined the first contacts between the Pueblo peoples of the Southwest and Spanish explorers after the arrival of Christopher Columbus. Native TV reporter Conroy Chino was the program's host, and Native poet Simon Ortiz wrote the script. This is National Native News, and for Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Gary Fife.
Alaskam inipiangi pilgui lingarat pikaktut ikayutinik inusukuven ilikun. Savalutit pillasingagait ikayutik satin ay maravingni. Savalutit iluaksivlugit meklektununlo katkangaronunlo. Mikirurak kaluak ikayutik sangit inuit kanoklima ukiyo kakaluak pata inmikun inunearumaruat. Ilisimapsaukuvin tamat kununa kokulalutin 800-770-0138.
Hi, I'm Joe Garney, and you can bet I watch Heartbeat Alaska, right, Jeannie?
Right. A major controversy with American Indians and Alaska Natives are the remains of their ancestors that lie in museums all over the United States and the world, and artifacts, ancient artifacts that belong to these people. Point Hope brought some of those remains home after 80 years of traveling as demonstrations in circuses and museums. The remains were removed from a cave at Cape Lisburne in 1908 by Jack Sipes, who was exploring the area during a break from his trip on the North Star. He brought the mummies to the lower 48 and showed them at circuses and sideshows as two Eskimo mummies. The remains are estimated to be about 900 years old. The remains were returned to Point Hope by an individual wishing to remain anonymous, who used the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History as a go-between. The remains had been in a private collection. The federal government recently passed a law called the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. This act requires federally funded institutions to return the remains and funerary objects of Native Americans to their tribes, but has no enforcement authority over private collections. The people of Point Hope held a service at their Episcopal church before burying the remains in the cemetery. Prayers were said, and the hymn, "Somebody's Praying for You," was sung as the grave was buried under the dirt. The bodies were returned in a plain wooden crate, despite assurances from the anonymous individual in Cincinnati that they would be ready for immediate reburial. The sight of the wooden box prompted one villager to comment, "They made enough money off the mummies, you'd think they could have afforded a casket," referring, of course, to the previous holders of the remains. We travel now to Aniak for the 9th Annual Elders Conference held April 1st and 2nd. This year's theme was the Year of the Grandmother. Villages involved, including Lower Calskag, Upper Calskag, Aniak, Chothpalak, Crooked Creek, Red Devil, Sleep Mute, and Stony River. Also in attendance were guests from Bethel. The theme was the Year of the Grandmother, and there were plenty of grandmothers. Elders and others from the community showed students how to do traditional crafts and skills. Also were instruction given in beading, grass basket making, soap carving, rabbit snares, beaver stretching, and fox skinning. Elders also brought crafts to sell. Later on in the afternoon, the elders met from each village to choose their elder representative from their village to serve on the Cusbuck's Elders Committee. Thursday evening featured a potlatch and special honors. Trophies were presented to the oldest elder in attendance, John Waskey from Aniak, born in 1906. The oldest elder also won a beautiful recliner. Evening entertainment included Eskimo dancing by Aniak, Kalskag, and Chatpalak. Raffle drawings were also held. Elders then danced for hours to good old-time music by the Russian Mission Yukon Fiddlers. The first Cusbuck School District Elders Conference was held in 1985. This year, over $4,400 was raised in donations and raffles. Thank you very much for that video. Appreciate it. And now we go on to Gary Fife. He attended the presidential inauguration. These are his opinions.
Washington tends to attract a lot of strange people, and generally they tend to express their emotions very quickly. They don't hide behind masks too much, but this guy turned out with a George Bush mask and saying goodbye.
Did you all stand out as Alaskans, other than the fact that you're Gary Fife from National Native News? Did you stand out as Alaskans?
Not really. It's such a crowd there that we didn't have much chance to stand out really at all. But we tried, to do what we could. I almost felt like wearing braid wraps in that day to remind them we were still around. Now we began to see the parade marshal area here. There was a group of 30 that were assigned a spot to ride in the President's parade. Unfortunately, a number of their horses did not show, and so they actually had to draw lots to see who got to ride. And those who couldn't ride decided to walk, and they formed their own little group. And
This guy looks familiar.
That's actor Rodney Grant of Dances with Wolves fame. He played Wind in His Hair, and he drew quite a crowd of admirers from the crowd who were there. A lot of female admirers were just swooning and calling his name, and one actually passed a note and I think invited him to England on a personal basis.
My goodness, I had the opportunity of interviewing Rodney for Northern Lives 2 years ago. He is a very nice guy, and there he is again on a horse.
Right, that's his mount, and that was probably one of the most nervous horses in the whole parade. So I actually was getting a little bit of an interview with him and watching out because his horse had this tendency to want to kick people. So I had to keep moving kind of fast in it.
These guys look familiar too.
Oh yes, this is wonderful. These are our Alaskan Eskimo Scouts, and this is the second time these guys have been there. And they were wonderful people. It was just a thrill and a lot of fun to see those people in the
What was the reaction from the audience when they saw these guys? Did they know they were from Alaska?
Yes, they did. They picked off the white camouflage very quickly, and you got some strange descriptions of their headgear, everything from muskox or yak or something like that to pack rat or something like that. A couple of them got guess beavers, but they were suitably dressed for the weather. It was kind of chilly that day. These are the wonderful dancers and singers from Barrow who were there. Actually, I found a lot of listeners among that group, and I signed an autograph or two. It was kind of flattering for them to do that. I got a little bit of a kick out of it. It's all from Washingtonians after having lived there. They're very, for the most part, educated and very inquisitive and informed about their world. But they were still asking some basic questions about Alaskan people and reflected that there's still a lot of ignorance out there, but they were getting to have a one-on-one with dancers and singers from above the Arctic Circle.
Who are these people?
That is yours truly. That was shot by a Capitol policeman. I was in my combat outfit for the day, fighting my own personal little conflict, trying to keep up with the president. And it's quite a useful outfit with all those pockets. You have lots of places to store things like tape and batteries, and it's warm. was pretty chilly that day. Even Kenny Rogers showed up in a fur coat. These are the famous Navajo code talkers, the U.S. Marines from the Second World War. They were the ones who transmitted the intelligence reports in their own language from one outpost to another, and they used a code that was never broken by the Japanese during that war and actually saved a lot of lives and the U.S.'s victory in the South Pacific, because they could never find out what they were saying. And they came up with amazing words, they would describe a tank as Iron Turtle, or an aircraft carrier as Bird Carrier, or artillery as Wagon Gun, or machine gun as Many Shoot Gun. Things that don't normally occur in the Navajo language. They had to work with the Marine Corps and come up with their own material. They wear these gorgeous turquoise medallions, and they carry the flag quite proudly, and you can tell when they go by they were proud to serve their country. And
Thanks, Gary. It's nice to see you off camera, so to speak, from your own personal perspective. The Alaska Native Health Board is not with us this week. They will return next week. However, Dr. Dennis Greene is here, and he gives us some good advice on fighting with each other, what to avoid, and how to deal with it.
Thank you, Jeannie. We all know that the people that we tend to argue with the most are the ones that we care about the most. We would treat a perfect stranger on the street, or someone that we might meet on an airplane, much kinder and nicer and more politely than we would someone we truly care about. And if we really think about it, I think we know the reasons why. We tend to believe that we are entitled to special treatment from those that are members of our family, husbands, wives, children, partners. And of course, they're thinking the very same thing from us. And so we have people who mistakenly believe that somehow they ought to be treated with a little bit more respect and kindness than they are more likely to get in reality. The next time you find yourself heading toward an unwanted argument or fight with someone you really care about, why don't you ask yourself some of these questions in advance? What's at stake here? Is it my pride, my self-esteem, my partner's self-respect? What will it take to win this argument? If I win the argument, do I take a chance on poisoning the whole relationship? What will my kids think of me if I apologize to them, even though I know I'm wrong? These are some questions you might want to ask yourself in advance before you find yourself in some fight that was totally unnecessary. For Heartbeat Alaska, this is Dr. Dennis Greene. See you next week.
May I help you, sir?
Yeah, I'll have a Coca-Cola.
You sure you want a Coke?
Yeah, I want a Coke.
Okay, pal.
How did you order a Coke? It tastes good. You didn't care if it was a Coke. You just... I'll just have a cola. I'll just have a cola. I'll just have a cola.
Need a drink, sir?
I'll just have a...
You'll just have a...
I'll just have a Coke.
Ooh.
Hear that, guys? A Coca-Cola. See ya, pal.
Oh.
Аккаллаараартлхит ангнираркауяақу тамлхмитахуамтхаанам таиунаақлхатсиқилиқнахааqa таулукуумаалларкаамгнунниит нун икааюутстангтортханрат нуннаит нивииталлхит аттунгиинун qatigнаррикааюлларкаит нунаанириуллрит нун наллунерискунгаанқаркуу тассиигаалангорамак икааюриулраамак қаяагаоқи килитнаарувит аккалларвит хуаллу 800-770-0138 таамун.
Heartbeat Alaska was at an intertribal powwow held here in Anchorage yesterday. The visitors were Lakota singers.
Okay, one of the reasons why we put this together is the Northern Plains Intertribal Powwow. We hold a lot of them down there in South Dakota and around the nation, the lower 48. And it's a gathering of a lot of people to, in contest more or less, but up here we're not having a contest, but to invite people in a public area to come in and enjoy what the Northern Plains powwow is all about.
You have visitors. Who are they? Why are they here?
We have visitors from Ogallala, White Clay, Nebraska. There are some singers from down there in South Dakota that we invited up here to help sing a few of the local native songs down in South Dakota, and we really enjoy their having been here, and they're really honored to be here in Alaska. And we showed them around, and they really loved Alaska. It's beautiful.
Are the Lakota singers special guests? Could you explain that?
Yes, the Lakota singers are special guests. We had called them up a few weeks back ago, and they were most invited to come up here. They sing a lot of ceremonial songs that take place down there in Pine Ridge and Ogallala. I can't really get too in depth of the different ceremonies we have down there, but they're very good people to meet, and they'll sing any song that you wish for you to sing with them, and they'll invite you.
Explain the flags.
The flags is, of course, in all ceremonies and basketball games, baseball, whatever you name it, rodeos. We always have a presentation of flags, which is a color guard. And when I first came here, I didn't see one at any of the ceremonies that I came to. So I had talked with a few of the natives here and got the okay from them to develop a color guard with the natives here, and it involves a lot of the veterans from different wars. And they get a chance to carry a flag, POW flag, the United States flag, the Canadian flag, the different Cheyenne River Sioux tribe flag, whatever flag's available, whichever they feel comfortable carrying, especially the Vietnam veterans. A lot of them like to carry the POW flag, and they do have a chance to carry it at every ceremony that we have been having. And like I said, I've been, this one we put on ourselves, Mr. Bill Braveheart and myself. It took us a lot to formulate this together, and we had a lot of good help from a lot of different neighboring people around the area. And we can't ever give out so much thanks to having them let's just put on here at the East High School, and it's really enjoyable.
Intertribal powwows are very spiritual events. Drugs and alcohol are absolutely not permitted on the premises. April, by the way, is Alcohol and Drug Prevention Month. That tip given to me by the Indian Health Service. And speaking of powwows, coming up is the biggest powwow of the year. That's the weekend of June 12th, called Spirit Days. If you haven't attended, you better make it. Thousands of people gather together for food, dancing, and lots of fun, lots of spirituality, lots of sharing. We turn now to the final segment from Savagery and the American Indian, produced by the British Broadcasting Corporation.
But the roots of these images lie in the time of Columbus, when the first European explorers were trying to make sense of the New World. Many people saw the Indians as gentle, noble savages living in harmony with nature. But as settlers started to take Indian land, attitudes quickly changed. The Indian became a bloodthirsty brute, resisting God's chosen people. This image justified generations of whites as they pushed across the continent. As the frontier approached, Indians had only three choices: to move out of the way, to become like whites, or to die. In 1890, with the massacre at Wounded Knee, the frontier had finally run its course. From an estimated 5 million or more in 1492, the American Indian population had fallen to a mere 250,000.
I'll be meeting with the producers of Savagery and the American Indian later on this month, and I hope to share that with you. Now, speaking of sharing, Elise Patkotak gives us her views on coping with the flu.
We had a flu epidemic here recently. At one point, it seemed as though half the town was sick at once. Because I firmly believe in the concept of sharing, I too had my time with a bug. So there I was one morning, shivering in the warmth of my home, looking as lovely as ever in 14 layers of clothes, thinking death could possibly be easier than living one more day with the flu, when my dog decided that no matter how close to death I actually was, I should put him out one last time. I opened the door to a standing cold of 48 degrees below zero. With wind chill, it dropped to about 80 below. You haven't really lived till you've opened the door to your house on 80 below weather when you already have chills from the flu. I don't know what's more ludicrous, living in a world in which the temperatures drop to 110 below with wind chill, or living in a place where the Weather Bureau calls off the wind chill advisory when the temperatures rise up to minus 70 below. I realized my hands felt warmer in my freezer than they did in gloves when I was outside. When you realize your hands are warmer inside your freezer than they are outside your front door, you remember that moment with startling clarity. It's like the day you figure out your mother and father do it. You're never quite the same afterwards. But then the temperatures rose up to minus 10 below and the sun came back. The world was white and new and as big as the universe itself. The flatness of the tundra had been carved by the wind and snow. The pack ice created jagged sculptures along the pressure ridges that seemed to recreate a moonscape in ice. The sky seemed bigger and bluer than it ever was before, and I fell in love all over again. The sweeping whiteness, the icy blues, the chilled seas, they evoke an emotion in me that I've never fully been able to understand. I never want to lose the mystery of the Arctic or the hold it has on my emotions. I never want to lose the feeling of awe and reverence inspired by a land so clean and brilliant that you would swear the earth had only just been created. I just wish we could settle on something less than 50 below zero as the price of that mystery.
Thank you, Elise, and thank you for joining me right here on Heartbeat Alaska, Native News across the North. If you have any information from your community that you would like to share, please give me a call and we'll do our best to get it on the air. Look for us again next week, won't you? For all of us here at Heartbeat Alaska, have a wonderful week. I'm Jeannie Greene. Thanks for joining me.